Imagine lying in your warm bed at 3 a.m. Outside your window, the howling wind is suddenly cut short by a sound no one ever wants to hear. Help me! Help! He stabbed me! That was the final scream of Kitty Genovese, a 28-year-old woman on her way home. Her attacker, Winston Moseley, wasn't a ghost. He was flesh and blood. He stabbed her for the first time right under a street lamp. But the most terrifying part of that night wasn't the knife, and it wasn't the scream. The most terrifying thing was the silence that followed. When the lights from the apartments flipped on, the killer panicked. He ran to his car and drove off. He thought the police would arrive instantly. He expected sirens. But nothing happened. No sirens. No footsteps running down the stairs. No one shouting, "Stop!" Just dead silence. And that very silence sent the killer a message, an invitation. 10 minutes later, he came back. He found Kitty trying to crawl into her building's hallway, bleeding out, barely clinging to life, begging her neighbors for help. And this time, he finished the job. He killed her, right in the place she thought was safest. The next morning, the NYPD report shook the world with a single headline. 38 people witnessed the murder, and no one did anything. Not one, not two, but 38 decent, law-abiding citizens. They turned on their lights, they watched. Some even pulled up chairs, as if they were watching a free horror movie through their window. What are you feeling right now? Rage? Disgust? And more importantly, you're telling yourself, if it were me, I would have run down there. I would have called the cops. I would never have let her die. Are you sure? The brutal truth is, those neighbors weren't monsters. They were just like you. They were fathers, mothers, diligent office workers. They didn't refuse to help because they were heartless. They didn't help precisely because there were too many of them there. The killer returned twice because he, whether accidentally or intentionally, exploited a deadly glitch in the human brain, a psychological mechanism so powerful it can turn the best people into stone statues. It's called the Bystander Effect. And believe me, this system error is running in the background of your mind right now. If you don't know how to shut it off, the next time tragedy strikes, statistics say you will just stand and watch too. Today, we're going to dissect it.
Most of us grow up with a belief, almost an instinct, safety in numbers. If you crash your bike, would you rather do it at a busy intersection or in a deserted alley? If you have a heart attack, would you want it to happen in a packed stadium or an empty park? Common logic says this: the more people around, the more eyes watching you, and the higher the chance you'll get help, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Social psychology has proven a brutal mathematical paradox. The more people witnessing an event, the lower the chance you will receive help. Think of it like a responsibility pie. If I'm the only one seeing you in trouble, I own 100% of that pie. I know that if I don't act, you die. The weight is entirely on my shoulders, forcing me to move. But if 100 people see you, that responsibility gets sliced up. Each person only holds 1% of the pie, and 1% isn't heavy enough to make anyone move a muscle. Everyone thinks, surely someone else will do it. There must be a doctor here. Someone probably called the cops already. The result? Everyone waits for someone else to act, and in the end, no one does anything. When we hear about the Kitty Genovese case, our first reaction is judgment. We call those 38 neighbors apathetic, cold-blooded, or even accomplices. We want to believe they were bad people, completely different from good people like us. But that is a dangerous mistake. The truth is, those neighbors weren't suffering from apathy. They were suffering from paralysis. They were trapped in an invisible psychological web where the presence of others isn't a support system, it's a barrier to action. The crowd isn't a shield. The crowd is a sedative. And to understand why this sedative is so potent, potent enough to make people watch a girl die for 30 minutes, we need to look inside our own brains. We need to travel back to a lab in 1968 where two psychologists decided to recreate that fateful night right inside a smoke-filled room.
After the Kitty Genovese tragedy, while the press was busy blaming the moral decay of New Yorkers, two young psychologists at Columbia University, Bibb Latone and John Darley, suspected something else. They didn't believe those 38 neighbors were cold-blooded monsters. They believed that the situation itself had turned good people into bystanders. In 1968, they decided to test this with a famous experiment called the smoke-filled room. Imagine you are a student invited to take a survey. You sit in a small room filling out a questionnaire. You think that's the whole test, but it's not. As you focus on your paper, white smoke starts leaking through the vents. At first, it's just a thin wisp, but soon it gets thick, blocking your vision and stinging your eyes. This is clearly a sign of a fire. The experiment had two scenarios. Scenario 1, you are in the room alone. What is your reaction? Almost instantly, you stand up, you check the vent, you run out to report it. Result? 75% of participants raised the alarm within the first 2 minutes. Survival instinct and responsibility worked perfectly. But scenario 2, you are in the room with two strangers. What you don't know is that these two are actors working for Latone and Darley. Their instructions are, sit still, keep filling out the form, and pretend nothing is happening even as the room fills with smoke. What do? You look at the smoke, then you look at the two strangers. They are calmly writing. You look back at the smoke, you start to panic internally. Is there a fire? Why aren't they running? Is it just steam? Is it harmless gas? The result is terrifying. Only 10% of participants reported the smoke. The other 90% just sat there, coughing and rubbing their eyes, trying to finish their quiz while the room turned into a gas chamber. They would rather risk burning to death with the crowd than be the only one to panic. But Latone and Darley didn't stop there. They wanted to raise the stakes, not just smoke, but a human life. They conducted a second experiment, the seizure. This time, you are put in a private room wearing headphones and a mic to discuss with a group via intercom. You can't see anyone, just hear voices. Suddenly, one member of the group starts having trouble. His voice stammers, his breathing gets heavy. Please, help me. I'm having a seizure. I think I'm gonna die. Then choking sounds and absolute silence. If you believe you are the only one hearing this, a two-person group, 85% rushed out of the room to find help in under 60 seconds. But if you believe there are 4 other people listening, a 6-person group, the helping rate plummeted to a pathetic 31%. Furthermore, those who didn't help weren't just relaxing. When researchers entered, they found these people trembling, palms sweating. They wanted to help, they knew something terrible was happening, but they were frozen in place. So what on earth is going on in our brains at that moment?
Psychologists have identified 2 main switches that the brain automatically flips when we are in a crowd. These 2 switches are the culprits that kill compassion. First, diffusion of responsibility. This is the mathematics of guilt. When you are alone, the burden of responsibility is 100%. If that person dies, it is your fault. That guilt is too heavy, forcing you to act. But when there are 38 people, the responsibility is sliced up. You only carry less than 3%. Your brain tells you, why me? Maybe someone else called the cops. Maybe that guy is a doctor. What if I intervene and make it worse? Responsibility belonging to everyone means it belongs to no one. Second, and even more dangerous, pluralistic ignorance. This is when we use other people's reactions to define reality. In an emergency, humans try to appear calm. No one wants to look like a maniac screaming in panic when they aren't sure what's happening. We put on a cold poker face. Let's go back to the smoke-filled room. You see smoke. You are worried. But you look at the guy next to you. He is wearing a mask of calm. You think, he isn't scared, so it must be fine. But you don't know that inside, he is screaming with fear too, and he is looking at you. He sees you looking calm, so he reassures himself that it's fine. It is a deadly loop. Everyone is looking at each other for clues, but all they see is the fake calmness of others. The entire crowd comes to a false conclusion: there is no danger, while in reality, disaster is striking. And there is a third factor, less talked about but incredibly powerful in modern society: evaluation apprehension. The fear of doing it wrong, the fear of looking foolish, the fear of becoming the center of attention sometimes outweighs the fear of death. You are terrified that if you rush to save someone and it turns out they were just sleeping deeply, you will become a laughingstock. In that life or death moment, our primitive brain prioritizes social acceptance over a stranger's life. So, what does this mean for us in the 21st century, when the crowd isn't just people standing next to you on the street, but millions of people on the internet?
If you think the bystander effect only happens on lonely, deserted streets, think again. In 2024, the largest crowd isn't in Times Square. It's right in your pocket. Welcome to the era of the digital bystander. Think about the last time you saw a post bullying someone on social media. Thousands of hateful comments, tens of thousands of shares. Did you report it? Did you speak up to defend the victim? Or did you just scroll past, maybe drop a sad react and move on to a cat video? Online, diffusion of responsibility hits its absolute peak. When a million people are watching, your personal responsibility drops to virtually zero. But the most terrifying manifestation of this effect in the smartphone age is the phenomenon of filming instead of helping. We've all seen the viral videos: a person getting beaten up, a car accident, a girl being harassed on the subway. And what surrounds them? A forest of raised phones. No hands reaching out to intervene, just glowing camera lenses. Why do we do this? Are we so desperate for views that we trade in our humanity? Psychologists suggest the reason is much deeper. The phone screen acts as a psychological shield. When you view a tragedy through a 6-inch screen, even if it's happening right in front of your face, your brain is tricked into thinking you aren't really there. You stop being a participant. You become a spectator. The unfolding event becomes a movie, a piece of content, rather than reality. The act of filming allows you to feel like you're doing something. I'm documenting evidence without actually having to face the danger or the responsibility. It is the brain's most sophisticated way of escaping reality. So in that split second of decision, how does the brain choose between intervene or walk away? It doesn't flip a coin. It calculates. Researchers Pilyavin proposed the cost-reward model. In a millisecond, your brain becomes a ruthless economist. It places two things on a scale. On one side is the cost of helping. Could I get hurt? Physical risk. How much time will this take? Time risk. What if I'm wrong? Will I look stupid? Social risk. On the other side is the cost of not helping. Will I feel guilty? Will others judge me as a coward? If the cost of helping is too high, for example, the attacker has a gun, and the cost of not helping is too low, for example, no one knows who I am, you will walk away. But the biggest enemy in this equation isn't danger, it is ambiguity. You see a man collapse on the sidewalk. Your brain starts racing. Is he having a stroke? Or is he just drunk? You hear a scream from the neighbor's house. Is that domestic violence? Or just a loud couple fighting? Or are they watching a football game? This uncertainty is poison to action. In the face of ambiguity, the brain never chooses the high-risk option, intervening. It always chooses the safest option, do nothing. So, how do we hack this system? How do we break the paralysis, cut through the ambiguity, and overcome the fear to act when it matters most? We need a new blueprint. We now know the enemy isn't apathy. It's the brain's automatic mechanism. So how do we override it? Here is the action blueprint to break the paralysis. We will split it into two scenarios, when you are the bystander and when you are the victim. Next time you see something wrong in public, do not let your brain go on autopilot. Run this three-step protocol immediately. Step 1. Notice the anomaly. Train yourself to observe. Put your phone down. Look around. If you see a crowd looking in one direction, don't look at the crowd. Look at what they are looking at. Step 2. Interpret. The danger assumption rule. This is the most critical step to kill ambiguity. If the situation is unclear, e.g., screaming, someone collapsed, always assume it is an emergency. Ask yourself, if that were my loved one, would I want someone to check? It is better to run over and find out it's just a drunk person and feel a little awkward than to walk away and let a stroke victim die on the sidewalk. Accept the social awkwardness to save a life. Step 3. Assume responsibility. Do not look at others. Do not look for a doctor. Do not look for the police. Tell yourself this mantra: I am the only one here. No one else is coming. As soon as that thought hits, apply the 5-second rule. Count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and move your feet. Do not give your brain time to rationalize or fear. Physical action breaks psychological paralysis. But what if you are the one on the ground? What if you are Kitty Genovese? Do not scream, "Help me," or "Somebody help." These generic pleas will hit the wall of diffusion of responsibility and bounce right off. Everyone will think somebody means anyone but me. Instead, you must convert collective responsibility into personal responsibility. You must choose a hero. Follow these steps. Lock eyes, scan the crowd, and lock eyes with one specific person, anyone. Point. Point your finger directly at them. This action shatters their anonymity. They are no longer a passerby, they have been chosen. Command. Don't ask, order. State their identifier and exactly what they need to do. Example: you, in the blue shirt, yes you, call 911. I am having a heart attack. By doing this, you have handed that man in the blue shirt 100% of the responsibility. He can't look at anyone else. He is forced to act, and when he acts, magic happens. There is one final secret about crowd psychology. Crowds are cowardly, but they are also easily led. The crowd is waiting for one thing: permission. In experiments, when just one person dares to break the silence and rushes to help, the graph flips instantly. The rest of the crowd sighs in relief and rushes in after them. Oh, someone is helping, so the danger is real and it is safe to help. The brave action of the first person doesn't just save the victim, it liberates the entire crowd from paralysis. You become a moral catalyst. So remember, you don't need to be Superman. You just need to be the first. Don't be afraid of being judged. Your awkwardness might be the signal that saves a life.
Let's go back to that Cole Street in Queens in 1964 one last time. Historians have since debated the exact number of 38 witnesses. Maybe they were fewer, or the situation was more complex than the papers said. But that doesn't change the core truth. Kitty Genovese died alone, in the middle of a city of millions. If just one person, anyone, had picked up the phone the moment they heard that first scream, Kitty might have lived. The killer might have been caught sooner. History could have been different. But no one did, because everyone thought someone else was doing it. We often think evil wins because bad people are powerful, but Edmund Burke once said something unforgettable. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. The bystander effect isn't just a concept in a psychology textbook. It is a mirror. The next time you see injustice, an accident, or someone in need, don't look around for the crowd's permission. Don't wait for a hero. Look in the mirror. The hero you are waiting for is you. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is acting even when your hands are shaking and your voice is cracking. Be the first to step out of line. Be the one who breaks the silence. And here's my small challenge for you this week. Observe. If you see someone struggling in public, even if they just drop something or look lost, step up and help. Train your responsibility muscle with small things, so when the big things happen, you are ready. Have you ever been in a situation where you wanted to help but froze because of the crowd? Or have you ever been the only one to stand up? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this video helped you understand your own mind a little bit better, hit the like button and subscribe to Psych Blueprint. We release new videos every week to give you the psychological blueprints to live a more intentional life. Thanks for not being a bystander today. See you next time.